Hi, today we are going to learn basic Linux. This tutorial is for beginners. We have divided this basic Linux tutorial into smaller modules and each module cover a topic. Okay, so let's get started. So, I mean, in this 15-minute segment, we will cover introduction, what actually Linux is, history, features, and we'll also see how we can have a working Linux OS available with us so we can exercise, we can understand this operating system and we can practice command and we can learn more of Linux. Okay, so Linux is a complete multitasking, multi-user operating system. By multitasking, it means it can run multiple tasks simultaneously, and multi-user means that multiple user can log in and work on the same OS. Okay, so first we should understand what actually is an operating system. An operating system is an interface between user and the machine. The way we work on Windows is also an operating system. It has an user interface through which we work. Right, we actually, if you see, this is Windows, right? We have many tiles and many things available. Using this click, I can activate any service and I can use it. Similarly, Linux is also an operating system, but Linux is a very powerful operating system. The way it has been designed, now it's been used and embedded to every production system. So we'll get into that. So the best part of Linux is that it's freely available, and you can see these two URL from where you can download and start playing with it. Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, so before we start learning any operating system, it's very important to understand how this operating system, came into existence. So the story starts from the Unix operating system that was conceived and implemented in 1969 by AT&T and Bell's laboratory in United States, mainly by Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, and he had two other fellow scientists who were helping him out. The first release was released in 1971 and initially was completely written in assembly language, and you know how tough assembly languages are. So I mean, uh, Dennis Ritchie was facing some problem with networking module because he was not able to write it the way he wanted, and he was not able to achieve the functionality that he wanted. So he rewrote entire language in C. Dennis Ritchie created the language, right? C. So the entire Linux operating system is completely written in C, except for the bootloader and some of the I/O part. And so initially, it Linux Unix came into existence, but after AT&T and Bell separated, um, Bell started selling Unix under some proprietary license. So the educational institute weren't had many options. So Andrew S. Tannenbaum came into to rescue the educational institute. He provided a system which is a smaller version of Unix called Minix, but it too had limitation, including restrictive licenses. So after a while, Linux Torvald, was exposed to Minix, and he started working on it. And after a while, he felt that he can write a better operating system which can provide most of the functionality that Unix used to provide. And this is how Linux came into existence. And as of today, like, Linux is one of the de facto operating system that is being used from right from the embedded devices to to um any of the production system, be it telecom, be it satellite communication, be it real-time machine, be it supercomputer. So I tell you, it's very interesting. Once you have understanding of Linux operating system, you will enjoy working on it. Okay, so now we will go to the features. I mean, these are some of the features of the Linux operating system. Linux is an extremely robust operating system. I mean, there are machines which are running for 20 years without a single reboot. And I mean, most of the production servers which are running on Linux for years together have never seen any fail. This is because of the wonderful architecture and the simplicity, the way it has been written. It is very secure operating system. You might have heard of viruses, Trojan horses, phishing, a lot many stuffs that happen on Windows on day-to-day basis. But Linux is altogether in different league. There's no virus attack on Linux. It is also attributed the way it has been designed. Moreover, it is very scalable platform. Initially Linux started with x86, but now it is supported on almost any architecture. It is very easily manageable operating system. I mean, hardly needs any management. It self manages and highly available. Since many of the Linux kernels are freely available, like Ubuntu, like community operating system, which is known as CentOS, and many others, right? So it becomes essentially, I mean, unanimous choice. Why you are gonna pay huge bucks to anybody when it is available for free? Now it can be used as a replacement for Windows, yes. Ubuntu is a right candidate for that. So once you try out Ubuntu, you will understand why I am writing it into features. Okay, so let's move forward. It's easy to use. I mean, after the entire tutorial series is complete, especially beginners, you will find it very easy, to be honest. Okay, so now the interesting part. We know what Linux is. It's an operating system. So before moving forward into the tutorial, it is important to have a working Linux OS on our machine. So I have tested this method already. It works on Windows XP also, but I have tested on Windows 7 and 8. So how we can have a Linux OS, because most of us generally have a laptop or a desktop that has Windows running on the top of it, or a Mac running on the top of it, right? And if I want to learn Linux, how can I do it? The simplest thing is to create uh, a virtual a virtual layer, and you can install Linux into that, and you can use your Windows or Mac, and you can also use Linux along with it. So I find this approach as the best approach, so I will be telling how to do that. So these are the steps, very simple steps. If you follow it, you won't find it any problem, and you will be able to do it. So first thing is to download VMPlayer. This is the URL for downloading the VMPlayer. So I will show you. This is the URL. So you just go to the my.vm.com and you search for VMPlayer. Now depending on the operating system, no, whether it is 64-bit, 32-bit, you download VMware. You see VM Player is generally available for Windows and Linux version. Okay, so you can download it from here, and then you can install it. It's very simple. You just have to select next. You have to accept the license, and it gets installed. Then you need to download, as mentioned in the PPT, you need to download Ubuntu or CentOS. I mean, it depends on you. If you want a desktop environment, I find Ubuntu very soothing. It's very simple to use. It's almost comparable to Windows. CentOS generally I use it for more of development stuffs. I mean, because it's very similar to RHEL, so I find it interesting when I want to develop some applications or something. I prefer CentOS, although it can be done on Ubuntu. That's my personal preference. But I mean, it depends on you. So I have mentioned URL of both the operating systems. You can just copy paste, and as you can see, you can download. You just need to select which machine you want OS for, and then you can just click on download and it will be downloaded. Similarly, on CentOS you have to go to www.centos.org and download. You can also download CentOS for 64-bit or x86. It depends on you. Okay, so depending on the requirement, you just download it. And then how to create a okay, so you need to we have already downloaded a VMPlayer, right? So you just install the VMPlayer. After installing the VMPlayer, you need to click on this, create a new virtual machine. When you click on this, okay, before having this virtual machine, you need to create a bootable CD, or you need to have a ISO file somewhere in your system. So if you are able to create a bootable CD, and if you put it, you have to put it in your CD drive, then the moment you start VM player, it will show the OS. Okay, so it will show the OS, and you just need to click install from here. Or if you have an ISO file, then you have to select this option, and then you have to browse where your ISO file is, and you need to select your ISO file, and then it will give an option of installing, and then you click on install, and then you next, and the OS will be installed. So I have already installed. I will show you um, uh, my okay, so I will show you how it looks. So this is the CentOS that I have installed on my system for my personal use. Okay, so it looks very similar to Windows. You have computer, you go into these are your drive, these are the file system. We'll go into Linux file system, what are they, how they work, and everything, right? And that's a root directory. Here you click, it's very much like a windowing uh, drop down menu where you have accessories, graphics, internet, office, programming, a lot many stuff. So we'll go into each of them to try to understand how it works. Okay, okay, so so this is how we have created um, uh, Linux OS for our study purpose only, for our self learning. Okay, so we can move further in our tutorial. Now, since we have Linux available with us, it's important to understand how it functions, how it works. So just just to understand Linux is a combination of kernel and shell. This together forms the operating system, and this is the hardware. So Linux has two components. One is kernel and one is shell. Kernel is an interface between your system hardware and your shell, and shell is an interface between you and the kernel, or in general with your system. Okay, so any command you pass it on to the shell will invoke corresponding function in the kernel, and kernel will further communicate it to hardware, and this is how it functions. Okay, and this is not about only Linux, it's about every operating system. This is how they work. Okay, so you can see kernel, the OS program of Linux is the kernel, right? It's a control, it's a con- uh, it controls computer resources, allotting them to a different user and different tasks, interacts directly with the hardware, making program easy to run, does not deal directly with the user, as we already discussed. Okay, so what is shell? Shell acts as a command interpreter. So anything you run any program or any command you run, it runs in actually in the shell environment. Okay, so let's move forward. So these are some of the features of the shell. We'll discuss shell in detail. I think Linux file system, it is the first important thing that we need to learn. Linux file system. So we'll learn Linux file system, and then we'll complete our tutorial, and then in the second tutorial we'll study some other stuffs. Okay, so what is a file system? A file system is a is actually a structure. A file system is actually a structure that stores data, right? So in Linux you have a root directory, and then from the root you have etc, home, user, and many other directory. We'll see practically. Okay, so let's go into, so okay, so let's go into the root directory. This is root. How root is represented in Linux by a by a slash. Okay, backward slash, forward slash, sorry. Okay, so these are the directories, and these are the basic directories that Linux operating system has, and it works. So let's understand what what are these directory for and how they function, what is their meaning. The first directory is srv. What is srv? Srv is the service data. So it is the Linux operating keeps service data in this directory. Then opt. Opt is optional add-on, so application or optional add-on, so generally Java and other stuffs are stored here. Then you have user. All user programs are kept here. Then you have boot. Boot is for bootloader file. This is how your OS boots up, right? So that file is kept here. Where is the variable directory? Here. Generally you keep variable files like the Linux logs and other variable files. The size keeps on changing. Home is for home directories. All the user logins are created under this directory. Mount is the mount directory. All the file systems are mounted in this directory, right? Library, as the name suggests, it has all the libraries. Binary, the binary directory contains all the user binaries. Okay, SBN contains system binaries. Proc contains process information, and contains system files. SE Linux, it is a security functionality of Linux, so it has files related to that. Then the miscellaneous has all the miscellaneous stuff. Entity has the networking stuff. Dev has all the development sorry, all the device files into it. And then the root, and the media has the external media, whichever you, when you start a pen drive, it is mounted here in the CD-ROM and everything that mounted. etc is generally keeps all your configuration files. Temp is for all the temporary files which is made when you are working, is kept here. Okay, so how you change directly? You use cd command as you do in Windows, and you do just name of the directory, and you just go into file. So you see, I mean, these are the binaries, right? No, kept here. These are the user binaries that are generally available, and that you can use. Okay, so going back to the presentation, so just a little explanation. Okay friends, so now we have come to the end of our day one tutorial, and I have tried to just give you a brief introduction what Linux OS is and how you can get it on your system, and then I've just given you a brief directory structure. I want you to spend entire day on it. Learn by searching on Google, read books, around whatever you have learned today. And the second part of the tutorial will have uh, detailed topics. Topics would be you can see types of user, basic Linux command. Then we'll touch some Linux advanced commands via editor, permissions and groups. Okay, so this ends our presentation for today. Let's meet in day 2.